The question of genuine freedom in the modern world is more pressing than ever. Think for a moment. Are you truly free? Your day begins with reaching for your phone, initiating an endless scroll through feeds in search of something new, something exciting, something to distract you from reality. Then comes the morning coffee, a sort of dopamine fix. A short video, a fleeting song, all designed to dispel the encroaching boredom. On the way to work or school, the stream of stimuli only intensifies. Podcasts, social media, a relentless barrage of notifications. And then, when that long-awaited moment of silence finally arrives, what happens? Suddenly, a feeling of discomfort arises, a sense of inner emptiness, a need for another dose of distraction, another source of instant gratification. Pleasures in and of themselves are not the problem. They are a natural tool embedded in the human mind, an evolutionary mechanism that compels us to seek things that sustain our lives. But what happens when the pursuit of pleasure becomes a prison? When the overwhelming need to constantly feel good makes us prisoners of an endless cycle of instant gratification? What awaits us at the end of this path? In the distant past, almost a century ago, Aldous Huxley, a visionary of his time, left us with a prophetic warning. While George Orwell, in his iconic novel 1984, painted a grim picture of a future rife with brutal repression and total control, Huxley offered an even more sinister perspective. He foresaw a world where the need for coercion and violence would disappear altogether, where people, immersed in countless amusements and oversaturated with pleasant stimuli, would lose the very thought of rebellion. It would be a world where slavery would not need chains or shackles, for people would themselves love their servile condition. Today, one need only look around to see Huxley's predictions taking shape. Modern society, gripped by an insatiable thirst for entertainment, consumes pleasures without measure or restraint, seeking instant relief from any discomfort. But at what cost does this relentless pursuit of fleeting happiness come? Does this boundless pursuit of pleasure truly liberate the individual? Or does it, on the contrary, trap them in an even more sophisticated snare? In this exploration, we will attempt to understand how modern society insidiously trains us to seek pleasure, turning it into a sophisticated form of control. We will consider why this addiction to instant gratification can transform a person into something they never suspected, a voluntary slave. If you are confident in your ability to control your own mind, it may be worth looking at the situation from a different angle. It is quite possible that you will discover that you have never truly owned yourself. The concept of absolute slavery does not involve shackles, torture, or total surveillance. It is based on seductive and destructive pleasure. In a situation where hedonism becomes the cornerstone of existence, slavery artfully mimics freedom. This is precisely the scenario that unfolded in Aldous Huxley's dystopian novel, Brave New World. Imagine a society where individuals are deprived of critical thinking because their existence is continuously filled with entertainment. The pursuit of meaning in life is supplanted by the unrestrained consumption of trivial pleasures, where enjoyment becomes not a personal choice but an imposed necessity. In his grim dystopia, Huxley created a world where people are conditioned from their earliest days to avoid any manifestation of discomfort. Whenever negative emotions, anxiety, or existential doubts arise, soma is always at hand, the perfect drug, plunging the population into a state of euphoria and submission. But is this world merely a figment of the imagination? One need only look at the everyday life of a modern person. What is their first reaction to boredom, sadness, or disappointment? Do they try to understand their feelings, or do they immediately seek a way to distract themselves? Social networks, television series, culinary delights, alcoholic beverages, shopping, intimate pleasures, pornography, video games, the list goes on and on. The modern era is characterized by instant gratification, where any discomfort can be suppressed in a matter of seconds with a single touch of the screen. A person no longer needs to confront inner emptiness. It is enough to simply fill it with another dose of pleasure. The most insidious thing is that all of this is presented as a personal choice. No one forces you to consume entertainment content 24/7. No one forces you to spend hours on Instagram or TikTok. No one threatens you with a weapon, demanding that you buy a certain product, eat a certain dish, or continue to endlessly scroll through the news feed. But if it truly is a free choice, why is it so difficult to stop? The answer lies in the deep-seated processes of conditioning that shape our reactions and behavior. When an individual systematically resorts to instant gratification as a universal remedy for the slightest discomfort, the brain interprets this as the optimal strategy. Over time, there is a gradual loss of the ability to constructively use periods of inactivity, to tolerate silence, to engage in self-analysis and reflection. The mind becomes incapable of enduring its own company, of being at peace alone with itself. As a result, a person unknowingly transforms into an embodiment of the dystopian vision predicted by Aldous Huxley, a contented slave whose imprisonment is ensured not by brute force, but by a constant stream of pleasures. But what are the underlying causes of this phenomenon? How does conditioning lead us to avoid critical reflection on reality and keep us in a vicious cycle of addiction? Surely, everyone has wondered why it's so hard to stop, to break this endless cycle. Why, even when aware of the need to focus on useful activities, does the hand involuntarily reach for the smartphone, and the brain crave a new notification, a new video, a new dose of stimulation? This is not accidental, not a regrettable coincidence. It is the result of purposeful learning that has been going on since birth. From the earliest days of life, we are taught to avoid any discomfort like the plague. The modern education system is not focused on developing critical thinking, but on the mechanical reproduction of information. The labor market, in turn, programs us to tirelessly produce material goods, rather than philosophize about the meaning of life. The entertainment industry offers an endless stream of distractions designed to prevent even the slightest pause for reflection on what is happening around us. Summing up all of the above, a society is formed where the real threat is not a totalitarian regime that suppresses freedom of speech, but a system that insidiously deprives us of any interest in defending it. A system that makes people apathetic to everything except consumption. Aldous Huxley, like a visionary, deeply understood the danger of invisible shackles. In his dystopia, Brave New World, enslavement was achieved not by brute force, but by the subtle art of persuasion. Citizens were taught to adore their own slavery, starting from the cradle. Hypnopedia, a method of suggestion during sleep, insidiously shaped their beliefs. Slogans were implanted in the subconscious. Everyone belongs to everyone else, and a gram is better than a damn, eradicating any need for doubt. People were raised to believe that happiness lies in unquestioning obedience, fleeing from contemplation and avoiding suffering. In the modern world, these methods have taken on new forms. Today's conditioning is not hypnopedia, but the pervasive algorithms of social networks, corporate advertising, and a continuous stream of stimuli that subtly guide our behavior. Each notification triggers a release of dopamine, leading to addiction. Short videos, which require no effort to absorb information, train us to passively consume content. And the reward for conformity, likes, approval on social networks, or instant gratification, reinforces the idea that this is the right path. As a result, a generation is formed that is unable to be alone with its thoughts, unable to cope with discomfort, and has forgotten how to think critically. The ability to question established dogmas is gradually lost. Ultimately, there's no need for a dictatorship to control the masses when people themselves reject any ideas that require mental effort. However, avoiding critical analysis and reflection has its negative consequences. The desire to avoid any discomfort makes a person more vulnerable to manipulation and less resilient to life's challenges. The constant pursuit of pleasure weakens the will and spirit, and happiness imposed from the outside can turn people into passive and subservient beings. But how does this happen? How can the pursuit of a world where there's no suffering lead to total subjugation? Imagine a world where no one experiences pain, where all unpleasant sensations instantly disappear, where there is no sadness, no disappointment, no anxiety. At first glance, this seems like the perfect place to live, a true paradise. But if you look closer, the question arises, what happens to a person who has never faced difficulties? What happens to a society that is programmed to avoid any discomfort? The answer is obvious. It becomes weak and defenseless. Aldous Huxley understood this danger with piercing clarity. In his dystopia, Brave New World, happiness was achieved through the constant use of soma, the perfect drug. This drug had no side effects or risks and only gave instant pleasure. But what was the cost of this happiness? People became unable to cope with pain, disappointment, and even their own consciousness. Any unpleasant thought or emotion was dissolved in chemical comfort. Life turned into an endless series of superficial pleasures: sex, entertainment, consumption. Anything that fell outside this scheme was perceived as a threat to stability and well-being. Let's take a look at the world around us. In the modern world, there may not be the notorious soma, but there are its modern analogs. Social networks, like a drug, offer instant doses of approval and recognition, feeding our ego. Dating apps, like a magic wand, eliminate the age-old fear of rejection, relieving emotional pain. Clever algorithms, like an all-knowing oracle, anticipate our desires, delivering exactly what we want, even before we realize it ourselves. All these achievements of civilization are aimed at eradicating the slightest discomfort, filling any void, and eliminating the need to make an effort. However, this constant flight from pain does not go unnoticed. For ephemeral pleasure, one has to pay with one's own psychological resilience. The cruel truth of life is that pain plays an important role in our development. Suffering tempers character, building resilience. Disappointments teach us to learn lessons and become better. Difficulties stimulate our personal growth and force us to develop. But when everything around is softened, when any challenges are skillfully avoided, we become more and more fragile and vulnerable. In the modern world, any discomfort is perceived as something unbearable. Minor failures are inflated to the scale of existential crises. Minor conflicts seem like real catastrophes, plunging us into the abyss of despair. Everything that requires patience or effort is ruthlessly discarded because we are taught to look for easy ways, instant pleasures, and quick solutions. This state of affairs makes it much easier to control us. A society of strong and resilient people, capable of accepting discomfort and learning valuable lessons from it, will never become an obedient herd. It will never agree to live in a system that restricts its freedom and tramples on its rights. But a society of emotionally dependent people who need constant stimuli to escape from inner emptiness, fleeing from any form of suffering, is an ideal environment for manipulation. Such a society will be obedient and manageable, turning into a perfect tool in the hands of those who crave power and control, without resorting to open violence. This is how the insidious trap slams shut. What initially seems like freedom, an opportunity to avoid any suffering, actually turns into our prison, depriving us of will and independence. However, there is a way out of the vicious circle. To break the vicious circle, it is necessary to realize the fundamental difference between fleeting pleasure and a high purpose. While the former is capable of enslaving a person, the latter, on the contrary, gives him long-awaited freedom. It is worth thinking about what we are really looking for in life: fleeting happiness or deep meaning, short-term pleasure or a high purpose. The answer seems obvious, but how many of us find the time to really reflect on this question? Modern society persistently convinces us that happiness is the ultimate goal of existence. But what does it offer us as this very happiness? An endless series of fleeting pleasures that do not bring true satisfaction. Likes on social networks, spontaneous purchases, casual, intimate relationships, rampant viewing of TV series, food oversaturated with chemical additives, causing a short-term surge of euphoria, and then leaving a feeling of emptiness. All this brings only temporary satisfaction, which never lasts long. This is the root of the problem. Pleasure is fleeting by its very nature. It requires constant renewal. Otherwise, the oppressive feeling of inner emptiness inevitably returns. Let us recall the most significant moments of our lives, those that really shaped us as individuals. Were these moments of fleeting pleasure or, on the contrary, periods filled with challenges, hard work, and overcoming difficulties? Viktor Frankl, an outstanding psychiatrist who went through the horrors of the Holocaust in his famous book, Man's Search for Meaning, convincingly proves that people cannot exist without a high purpose. He drew attention to the fact that even in the most inhuman conditions, those who found deep meaning in their lives showed incredible resilience, maintained their sanity, and ultimately survived. This is the paradox of human existence. The relentless pursuit of constant pleasure weakens us, while the pursuit of a high purpose, on the contrary, strengthens our spirit. Pleasure is readily available and instantaneous and addictive, much like a drug. A goal, on the other hand, demands significant effort, ironclad discipline, and unwavering resilience. But unlike fleeting pleasure, a goal doesn't vanish when the novelty wears off. It forges something steadfast within us, giving us the impetus to move forward no matter the obstacles. In today's world, there's a trend where society isn't interested in individuals questioning the meaning of their existence. The search for a goal is a process that requires considerable time investment, deep self-analysis, diligent work, and importantly, the ability to withstand inevitable hardships and suffering. All these aspects clash with the principles of a consumer society oriented towards instant gratification. A person who has found a life purpose doesn't feel a pressing need for constant distraction. They don't seek to fill every moment of their existence with superficial entertainment and don't succumb to manipulations based on false promises of immediate happiness. That's why modern individuals are subjected to a continuous stream of stimuli, distracting them from the search for their true purpose. An individual who is aware of their goal poses a threat to a system that thrives on people's emotional dependence. Therefore, if you feel dissatisfied with life, perhaps the solution isn't to increase the number of pleasures, but to reduce them. Maybe you shouldn't seek new entertainment, but get rid of the excess of it. It's important to ask yourself, what is the true engine of life? What motivates you to get out of bed every morning? Does one live for fleeting pleasures, or is one building something truly significant and lasting? So, how do you break free from the vicious cycle? How do you regain freedom of thought and will after realizing how the insatiable thirst for pleasure can enslave the mind? A key question arises: how to break free from this addiction? How to regain control over your consciousness in a world that seeks to distract, intoxicate, and cause emotional dependence? First of all, it's necessary to realize that the struggle will not be easy. The system is designed for a person to fail. It is interested in ensuring that they continue to seek fleeting pleasures, directing their attention to algorithms and endlessly consuming. However, there is a way out, and it begins with awareness of the manipulations to which one is subjected. The first step to breaking this cycle is strategically limiting pleasures. This doesn't mean becoming an ascetic and giving up all the joys of life. Rather, it's about consciously regulating the impact of addictive stimuli. The problem isn't the pleasure itself, but how it's used to control people. Temporary abstinence from certain pleasures, such as social media, processed foods, or uncontrolled consumption of entertainment content, leads to interesting changes. The human brain is rebuilt, regaining the ability to find satisfaction in simple things, and the irresistible craving for artificial stimulants gradually weakens. The next important step on the path to restoring personal freedom is regaining the ability to tolerate discomfort. If a person wants to regain control over their life, they need to relearn how to cope with feelings like boredom, dissatisfaction, and the absence of a continuous stream of stimuli. This implies being able to remain in silence, disconnect from the information noise, and simply be in the present moment, without feeling the need to constantly fill every second with some distracting factor. At first, this may seem like a difficult task. The brain, accustomed to regular dopamine surges, will persistently demand more. However, if a person shows resilience, they will begin to realize an important truth. Discomfort is not fatal. Moreover, it contributes to the strengthening of the personality. The third key step is the development of critical thinking. A person should ask themselves questions. Why is there a need for constant distraction? Who benefits from their addiction to quick pleasures? What could they do if they weren't chained by this cycle of instant gratification? The more questions a person asks, the clearer they realize that a significant part of their habits and desires wasn't formed by themselves, but programmed by a certain system. And only those who ask these questions get the opportunity to start rewriting their own destiny. The fourth stage, perhaps crucial, is to give preference to goals, not fleeting pleasures. As already noted, the pursuit of meaning in life is a powerful tool against enslavement by momentary pleasures. It's important to ask ourselves what truly matters, what we want to create, and how to give our lives more meaning. These are complex but important questions. However, a problem arises. Even if a person begins to break free from this cycle, the surrounding society remains deeply immersed in it. When a decision is made to change, the perception of those around us inevitably changes as well. Some will admire, others will reject. This is because breaking free from the chains of addiction turns a person into a mirror, reflecting what others don't want to see in themselves. If the reader has reached this point, then something has already awakened within them. They have realized that the relentless pursuit of pleasure is not freedom, but rather a cycle that keeps them trapped. Modern society no longer needs to shackle people to control them. It is enough to convince them to avoid any form of discomfort. Realizing the trap confronts a person with a key question. How will they use this knowledge? The path to liberation from the shackles of the system requires not just a willful effort, but a conscious movement against accepted norms. This implies a rejection of the seeming ease of existence and a willingness to accept the fact that true freedom is often associated with loneliness and the need to resist established orders. When attention ceases to be scattered on external stimuli, true vision opens up. A person begins to notice that many around them are still unaware. Some will admire their insight, others will reject it. The changes taking place in the liberated individual can cause discomfort to those around them, because their freedom becomes a threat to their illusory world. They will try to bring them back, convincing them that there are no problems in the existing system, claiming that life is created for carefree enjoyment. However, now that the veil has fallen, a person sees the true state of affairs. Pleasures devoid of a higher purpose are just another form of enslavement. Thus, the choice remains with them. They can continue to go with the flow, distracted by fleeting pleasures in search of another dose of dopamine, ignoring the growing feeling of inner emptiness. Or they can decide to regain control of their mind, define their life purpose, and become a person who cannot be manipulated. The author questions personal choice and reflects on the cyclical nature of existence. They ask rhetorical questions about feeling trapped and society's manipulation through pleasures. Inviting discussion, the author asks readers to share their thoughts in the comments, emphasizing that doubt is the starting point for finding freedom. They encourage liking and subscribing to the channel if the information presented has made them look at the world from a different angle. Emphasizing their position, the author states that the channel does not follow accepted norms, but strives for doubt, reflection, and understanding of hidden truths. They invite you to join the journey of self-discovery and liberation by clicking the subscribe button and turning on notifications, promising a continuation of the research. In conclusion, the author says goodbye until the next video, accompanying the words with music